Liz, thanks for joining me. Really excited to get into this with you. Would love if you could talk a little bit about your work and why you personally got into the pro-democracy space, civics education. Would love to hear a little bit about your story to start.
Amazing. Well, thanks for the invitation, Scott. Really looking forward to the chance to connect again. So, I have the privilege of being the CEO of Generation Citizen, which, as you know well, but others may not, is a real world democracy education organization. We believe that the best way for young people to learn civics is by rolling up their sleeves and becoming community problem solvers at the same time that they are learning core civic knowledge in middle school and high school. So we have the opportunity to partner with school districts and educators across 11 states to bring our experiential civics curriculum to students by partnering with teachers through professional development and coaching for teachers around a project-based learning approach to civics. It is such a joy. I've been doing in this role for about 4.5 years, and it feels like it has flown by because of, frankly, the moment we're in has brought a lot of needed energy to the civics education space. And I think particularly Gen Z's real energy for real world engagement makes this an exciting time to be working with young people and helping them engage in their communities as a way of deepening their civic learning and civic understanding. My own path to this actually is different from a lot of my colleagues in the organization. Many of our team members at GC are former classroom teachers. And so they've had the joy of being in front of a group of students in middle school, in high school, being civics educators, and then joined GC as a way to expand their impact across many more classrooms. I actually came into this really less through the path of education and more because of the pro-democracy nature of the work that we're doing. I grew up in a household that really lived the Shirley Chisholm quote, right? The first Black woman elected to US Congress, who says, "Service is the rent we pay for the privilege of living on earth." And I grew up in a house where that was expected, right? Participation in one's community, whether that meant through having a role in service in one's school environment, being an active volunteer in the community, playing leadership roles in different civic organizations in the city. Those were all things that I saw my parents and family members do and was expected to take on with increased responsibility as I got older. And so, one of the places, though, that I actually, even though I grew up with, I would say, a lot of civic encouragement at home, I actually didn't necessarily feel really comfortable bringing that into my school environment. I felt I was more of a shy kid, and even though I was really interested in US history and politics and all those things, for some reason I didn't feel comfortable bringing that into my classroom environment. But I had an incredible teacher as I began high school who did a really wonderful job at being not only a great teacher, but a civic mentor and encouraged me to bring the things that I cared about from the community I grew up in Jamaica Plain in Boston and bring that into school and helped give me a roadmap for how to use my civic voice in the classroom and how that could both strengthen my learning, but also foster a healthy culture within the school of talking about real world issues. And because he did that for me, I have always looked for opportunities to do that with other young people. And so my pathway into the role at Generation Citizen included roles working in government, working in other nonprofit organizations, and really always looking for places to encourage community members and create a platform for community members to determine the future of the communities they lived in, whether that was through urban planning and community planning strategies or through efforts working for Governor Patrick in Massachusetts. So excited to be in this role, really seeing civics education as firmly a part of the pro-democracy movement.
Really appreciate that. Let's go off that last point, and love hearing about your own, which I know a bit of, but love hearing about your own story too. But would love to explore more what you think civics education's role is in the pro democracy space. it seems like it's becoming more core to how the pro-democracy world, however you define it, sees its mandate. But would love for you to talk about why you think civics education is such an important part of whatever this pro-democracy community is.
Sure. I think that the way I think about a pro-democracy movement in this country is really a very loose web of organizations and individuals kind of working to strengthen the foundations of self-governance. And I don't think the concept of a pro-democracy movement in the US has been as tightly held for the last several decades. I think there have been these different nodes that are now increasingly seeing themselves as a part of a common project, and civic education is part of that. Fundamentally, education that promotes critical thinking is all about the project of preparing young people for the role of citizen, right? And the foundational responsibility of our public schools and our public education system is to prepare future citizens. Now, we also have had an increase, and for several decades, we focused maybe more on the role of schools to prepare future workers. But I think there has been a coming back to a recognition that the role of public schools is not only for the student themselves to be prepared for citizenship, but it is actually an engine for preparing the next generation of society for healthy democratic functioning. Um, I think that the last few years have also created more of an opportunity for a couple of really healthy debates to take place, right? One with the tension or connection between civic knowledge and civic skill development. And I think an increasing consensus that you can develop civic knowledge and civic skills side by side, whether that's through an experiential civics class like one would with Generation Citizen, or whether that's in a different kind of civics or US history class paired with some volunteering that's taking place through a service learning opportunity in your school or through participation in one's community that young people are doing with faith institutions or community groups outside. But that pairing of civic skills and civic knowledge development, they support each other in really powerful ways and also help young people develop civic virtue and civic disposition. But they also help make meaning of and give young people a greater connection to why civic knowledge matters, because they, in fact, have a positive goal that they're trying to work towards in their community, and they see the relevance of the knowledge in real time. Gen Z is a generation that has, in part because of the time that they're emerging, has really low trust in American institutions. The America's Promise Alliance does an excellent state of young people report, and they've noted in that report in 2024 that only 12% of young people trust Congress, but that 61% of young people trust other young people, right? More data behind what people said in the 1960s around don't trust anyone over 30. That's kind of where we are. And the reason I say that in the context of this conversation about the pro-democracy movement is that there is a desire for young people to be part of a solution. And to the degree that they find entry points through adolescence and through their school days to connect towards that sense of purpose and being part of something real, they're gravitating towards that and leaning into opportunities to work together with their peers and other young people toward solutions to the problems they see. The problems they see of gun violence, mental health issues, and supports needed, substance use. All of these are things that young people want to solve. And when they have opportunities to solve them together, that's really energizing. I think adults who are in the pro-democracy movement on voting rights, on information integrity, on many other areas that are part of the pro-democracy movement, they see that young people are have to be an engine to drive their ultimate goals forward, and are looking for ways that young people can authentically engage and see partnerships with civic education organizations, or creating avenues, youth councils, and other avenues for young people to work together to be part of problem solving, as critical towards reaching their ultimate goals around strengthening democracy. So pro-democracy organizations know they can't do it without the rising generation involved. And the rising generation is looking for and demanding education that meets the moment, and meets them where they are.
On the point, this is something I've thought a lot more about recently because I think it's become more prescient. But that point on um, young people not trusting institutions as much, or being frustrated, um, which I think there's been a lot of studies out there that demonstrates that. So you talked about merging understanding with trust and confidence in institutions, but a lot of young people, and it seems like this is actually very across the ideological spectrum, don't trust institutions or are frustrated with institutions. How do you think about a civics education? How does civics education respond to that reality amongst young people right now? The reality that, with valid reason, whether it's economic conditions, whether it's the inability of government to actually make tangible impacts in their life, they feel like institutions aren't delivering. So how do you teach civics while recognizing that?
Yeah, I love that question, Scott, and think about it all the time, because we are asked that, and the trust gap is raised often. I feel firmly it is not our responsibility or our charge to make young people trust Congress or make young people trust their governor. Um, I think if we were to have that approach, it would be a disservice to young people, because that would be talking about trying to push a kind of blind trust in something, rather than what is so important is that we want to support young people to trust their own eyes and ears in what they see and how they relate to government and other institutions. What I do say, though, what I do believe is, through the experiential civics approach that is focused on local and state government, which Generation Citizen is, I believe we create conditions for government to earn the trust of young people in their communities. And what do I mean by that? The middle schoolers and high schoolers in all the communities we work in, urban, rural, suburban, all kinds of communities, raise issues that matter to them so deeply. One issue that has come up time and time again is the issue of mental health, and young people feeling like the adults in their community aren't hearing them, aren't paying attention, aren't offering the supports through counseling that are necessary often to help them navigate what is a clear crisis among young people. Now, my vision of how our work occurs at Generation Citizen is not that we want to encourage students to trust the local health officials, or just trust that your mayor cares about you, but in fact, to guide them through a process by which they set a goal for the kinds of supports that they think are needed, that they believe would be most valuable, grounded in a root cause analysis and participatory research on the issue. And then that they go and research the different institutions in their community and supports that do exist, and the community assets around mental health, so that they then, with an informed opinion, go and talk to elected officials who are responsible for addressing this issue. And when they have those conversations, that is an opportunity for the mayor, a city council member, a Department of Health leader, a health administrator at the district. They now have an opportunity to be in a true dialogue and an exchange with this group of young people, with this classroom, and help them understand what they know from their perspective as leaders, how they make budgetary decisions on mental health resource allocation, and they are also able to demonstrate how they're listening and the kinds of information that they listen for from other stakeholders as well as from these students. And through what we hope is a not just a single interaction, but the beginning of an exchange between young people and their local government, we believe that that process fosters increased trust in both directions, right? That young people can have for under, oh, I understand how local government works. I understand how city councilors make decisions. I understand that if this issue has persisted, that it is not because it doesn't, that they don't care. It is because of these reasons, and here's a pathway forward. I believe that that kind of relationship, grounded in mutual respect, grounded in shared data and a shared understanding of what's going on, and the confidence that young people have that they have the skills to interact with and be heard by elected officials, that fosters an authentic potential for building trust. Now, that's an intense kind of experience that I just described, right? That could take place for, hundreds of students or thousands of students in a state. But when we think about the depth of the challenge that we're facing across the organization, across the country, I recognize that may feel too complex. But I actually think that there are ways for each of us, wherever we sit, however old we are, when we exercise our civic power, it doesn't necessarily mean we trust everybody, right? We shouldn't trust everybody. But it does give us, when we exercise our civic power, when we contact our elected officials, when we read information about the issue that we care about and parse truth from fiction, when we do that in a rigorous way, it gives us an opportunity to be discerning about our trust and say, I trust this part of the institution, but maybe I want to press this other part harder. And that's the kind of critical thinking that I think a high quality civics education organization, a high quality civic information outlet like media can foster when done well.
The point on yeah, I mean I really appreciate the point that it is not your job to get young people to trust their elected officials, but to provide experiences that might engender that. And the point on it's a it's a sort of a long, I mean it's intentionally it's necessarily a long haul on some of this stuff, right? I mean this is relationship building, it has to be. So I'm curious to sort of go back the pro-democracy piece of it. It seems I was obviously in civics education world. Now I'm a little bit outside. It seems like there's a lot more energy and attention on it. It also seems like the threats, the perceived threats to democracy itself are more acute right now, more urgent, more pressing. So a lot of the point that I think that we make back in the day is that civics education is necessary for the foundations of democracy. Now you have sort of a recognition that's still the case, but also a, well, what are we doing right now? I'm curious as how you balance that, right? Sort of in the pro-democracy space where you have a little bit of the like, what's being done right now vis-a-vis the what's being done to shore up long-term foundations of something that obviously has not been shored up for a while.
So I think short-termism in democracy, philanthropic investments, and policymaking has been a threat not only to civic education for a long time, but actually to democracy for a long time. And in particular, I think that one of the places that's been most egregious in terms of our short-termism is when we look at the billions of dollars that are spent on every election cycle compared to the millions of dollars that are spent towards long-term investments in I would say kind of governance reforms, right? The kinds of actions that could actually strengthen trust between citizen and elected officials, participatory budgeting, citizen assemblies, those kinds of reforms, right? That get pennies on the dollar for what goes towards elections. And that's both on the 501(c)(3) and C4 side, right? But we see so little investment in what could make a big difference over the next 20 years compared to what people are hoping will make a difference in the next 18 months. Now, I understand that. I understand that as an individual, and I understand the urgency that has been felt at every election cycle over the last 20 years. And yet, we need to be able to look squarely at that. And those with resources or those who influence resources need to be able to look, I would say, at moments like this with the long-term vision in mind. And if the long-term vision is a durable, inclusive, participatory democracy, right? Even if that participation is only voting, but a participatory democracy that the majority of Americans are involved in and believe in, if that's the goal, then there is no question to me that how we prepare our 0 to 18-year-olds to participate in that is a foundational building block of getting there, right? I mean, it's obvious that if you have this long-term goal of where we're going in mind, you have to think about how are we preparing not only the rising generation of voters, but the rising generation of judges and presidents and mayors and community members in a way that prepares us to move forward in that way. I think that there is the other thing I will say, because we talked a lot about trust, but the other things that I think are equally important to trust is hope and a sense of civic hope. Um, the fact that there is more despair in our society today, both despair, economic despair, and despair as it kind of compares to a mental wellness or well-being, but also a sense of civic despair and a sense of giving up. That is particularly that alongside a lack of trust and a lack of sense of belonging in society are really pernicious. And because there is sometimes an expectation or an idea that civic values can be fully learned in the home, I think we have to take quite seriously the notion that if we have a couple of generations of adults who are feeling a sense of civic despair, who are lacking in trust in institutions, who don't feel a sense of belonging, if that is what they're sharing with the rising generation of their kids, there are consequences to that. And this is where we have to recognize that public schools are the first public square that our young people engage in. And that should be a space in which there are both values and supports for students to learn in ways that support a sense of civic hope, a sense of belonging in one's community, and create conditions for building trust. And so I do think those all, yes, they are long term. Yes, they require a willingness to be thinking about the long game. And also, what I certainly talked to a lot of people about in 2024 as well is, and matters just as much in 2026, civics education includes seniors in high school, right? Civics education is also the place that you often have young people who might be thinking about, is it worth it for me to vote? Is it worth it for me to go to the DMV? Is it worth it for me to, to sign up online and decide to vote? And as we've seen in so many communities around the country, the way in which young people choose or don't choose to participate in elections have real world and quick consequences. So whether you're, committed to the long-term goal or you have more of are still caught in short-termism, I think there's still an argument to be made for the power of civics education. But I tend to spend much more of my time thinking about this long-term value that I believe that this work offers to the field.
Last question for me. Given all this, what does make you hopeful right now? Where are you finding places within civics ed, within GC that give you hope for the future?
So this is why I started by saying how incredibly lucky I am to be in this job, because I get the chance to attend our Civics Days events where students are presenting the work that they've done with their classmates over the course of a semester on the issues that they're looking to make change on. And I sometimes, get to visit classrooms where students are coming to consensus together and wrestling with these big issues. Every time I am in conversation with a group of students who have spent time being thoughtful about an issue and how they can solve it, I am filled with a sense of both pride and hope in what is possible, and a sense that even if the statistics tell us that Generation Z may have a negative perception around some areas of government or low trust in democracy itself, I am seeing evidence to the contrary every single day, and seeing evidence that young people are energized by working together to solve problems at the community level, and have seen that on some of the most painful issues. We are coming off of yet another horrific school shooting. And what I can say is, I have talked with brave students who have taken the pain of community violence and turn that into working together with hundreds of students for gun buyback programs in their community, or to work with the local police to take on solutions that both support the dignity of students and the safety of the community. And so I recognize that this generation has so much to offer our democracy, our communities, and just really inspired by their ability to take on incredibly painful and tough issues, and try to make things better for their siblings, for the students who will come up behind them, and for the next generation.
Thanks, Liz. Really appreciate all of this, and yeah, I appreciate the work that you all continue to do.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Scott.